Championship baseball is heating up, and we're talking all about that and much, much more on this edition of the Baseball Talk Radio Show. And hello and welcome aboard the Baseball Talk Radio Show. We're talking all about the playoffs heating up with the National League Championship and the American League Championship. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Division Series Championship. And Gary, how'd you enjoy some of those games in the past week or so?
Well, Rich, I tell you, they've been fascinating, interesting events happening. Very surprised at the ease of which Cleveland handled the Red Sox. A lot of people thought the Red Sox were going to go win it all, and Cleveland had no problem at all with them, it seems. They just went right through them like a hot knife through butter. And in the National League Series, the Cubbies and the Nationals and the Los Angeles Dodgers was quite an intriguing series. And really, that Game 5, depends upon how you want to look at it. It was either a great game or a lousy game, but it took about 4 hours to get that one played with Clayton Kershaw coming in, a la Madison Bumgarner. He came in the ninth inning to save the game, get his first major league save. And it was an interesting game in that Dodgers were down, and they had a 45 inning, I think it was the sixth or the seventh inning, in which they scored and took the lead and held on for dear life as the Nationals came close, got some guys in play in the ninth. Kershaw came in to get Murphy, get the last two outs, and that was the game. And really, Dusty Baker, who's not had the best of postseason records, has a habit of making a mistake, and usually they say he leaves his pitchers in too long. Pulled out Scherzer quickly in that game after, I think, 5 1/3, 5 2/3. He gave up a walk, and he had the hook out for him. And perhaps they should have left him in a little bit longer. But that was really kind of a shocker. And tonight, the Cubs and the Dodgers tee it up for the first game of the National League Series. And Rich, how about those Cleveland Indians in the American League Championship Series?
Yeah, the Cleveland. Surprising, as you said, nobody really pictured them to get this far. They weren't favorites. They surprised Boston, I think, as you said, but totally manhandled them at the same time. Just went through that series like it was nothing, swept them right out, 3-0, and they kind of look unstoppable, really. They have the 2-game lead now with the victory today in the ALCS. It goes back to Toronto, and we'll see what the Toronto Blue Jays have in the gas tank, whether they can respond to this Cleveland Indian team that, as you said, has really found its own now that it's October. They weren't the powerhouse that everybody expected them to be, but they're firing on all cylinders, so to speak, here in the playoff, and that's when it matters.
And they lost a couple of starting pitchers and key starting pitchers, and yet they've pitched fantastically, and their bullpen's been practically unhittable. They have really dominated. They dominated the Red Sox, as you said. Now they're dominating the Blue Jays. It's only 2 games, but and they both were at home. But I mean, it was just pure domination. 1 run for the Blue Jays in 2 games so far. And the pitching has been unbelievable. They have a good manager. Terry Francona is a terrific manager, one of the best in the business. And he's really utilizing Andrew Miller and just doing – they're getting timely hits. They just look unbelievable now. And, you got to wonder, is this Cleveland's year? I mean, the Cavaliers won the NBA championship. Could this be a turnaround for Cleveland? Well, will play out in the next 2 or 3 weeks or so, or longer. But it makes you think about these kind of things sometimes. Everybody thought it was the year of the Cubs, but we're all overlooking Cleveland, and here Cleveland has just been dominating. If they continue this in Toronto, and that doesn't mean they can't lose, but if they continue this sort of play and they lose some close games, it's still, you got to be counting them very heavily in the series and against whoever they may face.
Yeah, and wouldn't it be amazing if it was like a Cubs Cleveland World Series? I doubt the networks would like that too much because it's a little bit too much breadbasket, middle of the country type of thing. It leaves the West Coast out. It leaves the East Coast out for the most part. True baseball fans are going to tune into it, but I think they're salivating on more of a sort of an LA, maybe Chicago matchup rather than the Cubs. But then again, who knows? I mean, some of these ratings that the games have gotten have been amazing. The Cubbies' victory was one of the most watched games of all the series in the last couple years. And, it'll be interesting to see who makes it into the World Series. We've been enjoying all of the games so far that have been played out. And as you said, to get back to the LA Dodgers-Washington game, Washington had so many chances in that game. It was amazing. They were 1 for 10 with runners in scoring position. They could have pulled the trigger a few times, but just played a little bit too close to the vest, so to speak. It was Game 5, all or nothing. I thought they could have been a little more imaginative in their play. Maybe sneak out a surprise, try to steal home, try to do whatever you can do. You got to score those runs, and they just failed. And that's a failure for me. You got a Game 5 at home. The Nationals blow it again. And how many times have we seen them blow these division series?
Well, and that's the knock on Dusty Baker too, Rich, that he has a great track record in the regular season, gets his team to the playoffs. He's been to a World Series, but does something now, or I don't know. The team tenses up no matter where he's been, and they've had trouble in the World Series. But I just want to go back to one thing you said about the ratings, and I don't think they would mind a Chicago-Cleveland World Series in a way, because I think the Chicago story with not winning in 109 years, I think people are going to check in to see that. And I think the other flip of the side of that is that the Cleveland hasn't won since, 1948. So you've got two of the longest droughts there in between championships for in baseball for cities, that I think that would be enough of a storyline to get people to see who's going to end that drought. Now everybody thinks it's going to be Chicago, but you never know. If it's Toronto, they would lose half of their ratings because they don't count the ratings in Canada. So I think they would prefer to have the Indians and the Cubbies, or the Dodgers would be the ideal thing for the networks, the Dodgers and the Indians. But I don't think the Indians and the Cubbies are going to hurt them very much. Sorry to get off track about the Washington game, but
no problem, because I just wanted to talk a little bit about the ratings. And that game with the Cubs to clinch the NLCS was one of the highest rated games in Fox Sports 1 history. In fact, it is the most watched now, pulling an average audience of 6.3 million viewers during that game. At one point in the later innings, the game peaked at 6.95 million viewers watching on Fox Sports 1. And, it's great for the game. People are obviously on the Cubs bandwagon, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see if they can make it to the big dance. They've got a tough opponent in LA now. That game just underway as we're talking here on the podcast. It's going to be interesting to see who wins that first game and who starts to control that series, so to speak. It's going to be an interesting series.
Yeah, I'm sure LA would like to steal one of the first two in Chicago and then go home with a chance to win it. And as you say, it'll be interesting to see whether they can steal a game off of Leicester. I guess Arrieta will be going tomorrow. We'll see. I mean, Toronto wasn't able to do it against Cleveland in Cleveland, so now they're almost in a must-win situation at home.
Yeah, and some ticket researching for the game tonight at Wrigley Field. Those tickets are averaging, now this is an average, of $914
Oh,
playoffs. And I've heard some seats in the $20,000 range, if you can believe that, in little Wrigley Field there. So you've got some very expensive championship tickets at play there, but it doesn't even eclipse the ones from last year. The average price is what I'm talking. The Cubs' average price last year was $1,051. So maybe some of those Cubs fans are getting used to their Cubbies making it deep into the playoffs here.
wow, those are crazy prices, though, Rich. I mean, for that, I'd want to go to this, the game that they can actually win or clinch or something. Just the first game at those prices, no, thank you. But there are people that are crazy enough to do it, and I shouldn't say crazy enough. They want to be there, they want to do it, then all the power to them. But those kind of prices, I can watch it on TV and enjoy it.
Sure, and keep that money in the bank. Well, interesting there. And before I forget this one, we got a nice email from one of our listeners. I wanted to share it with all of the listeners here of the show. And it starts off, "Hi, guys. This is Trip from Columbus. Just wanted to say that I've been enjoying the show's new format, and I look forward to listening every week. Thanks for all you do in making the show. Also, I wanted to send congrats to Rich. Who knew? I wrote your preseason picks down, and it looks like you predicted 6 out of 10 postseason teams compared to Gary's 5 out of 10. So kudos, Rich."
And Trip, I thought you were my buddy.
He's got to tell it as it is. He goes on to say, "I also wanted to ask you both, if you had a vote on who gets into the Hall of Fame, who would you vote on for players like Barry Bonds, Mark McGwire, and Roger Clemens? And what about Pete Rose?" So let's just take that question real quick. And how would you answer that one, Gary?
Well, Rich and Trip. Trip, by the way, is a listener of Mets Musings as well. I think I'd get that in there if you don't mind, Rich. And a big supporter of the show, and I really thank him. He's a great guy. Pete Rose, definitely. We've talked about that numerous times on this show. Of course, he's talking about the steroids guys he's bringing up there with McGwire, Bonds, and Clemens. Wow. I guess I'm softening on this. They're going to get in someday. I think somehow they're going to find a way to get them in. I would have to say I probably would, though I can't stand Roger Clemens. I'd have to put a vote in for each one of them because, as much as we don't like it, Barry Bonds did hit all them homers, and the guy had a great career before all this steroid stuff. He was on his way. Probably didn't even have to do it, but wanted to play longer and hit the home runs, and that's probably one of the reasons he did it. McGwire, I feel to a certain extent McGwire was used a lot by Major League Baseball. They loved him when him and Sosa, after the strike, were coming back and going after Roger Maris's records and really used the guy, and then kind of tossed him to the side when these whole allegations came out. And I don't know if we know whether he used steroids or just he used supplements. We know that. And but at the time, the supplements were legal, I believe. So I don't know whether he did anything else. Don't know if I don't believe he failed any drug tests or anything. Clemens is just I mean, the records show, he was fantastic. I don't know how many, 5 Cy Youngs. I mean, the numbers are there. He's just a despicable human being. So, but look, the Hall of Fame is what you do on the field and not what kind of human being you are. There's a lot of despicable human beings in the Hall of Fame. So I guess I would have to vote for him too. So I would say a vote for all of them, including Pete Rose. The Hit King leader should be in the Hall of Fame for what he did on the field, not what he did off the field or in the spare time.
Yeah, and I'll have to agree with you on that, Gary, about Pete Rose. I think he's served his sentence, even though he at times has made it tough for baseball to embrace him with the different zany associations that he's had, especially out in Las Vegas, associating himself with the gambling side again when he's trying to come clean, trying to say he's a good guy. Yes, I still think he should be in the Hall of Fame for the reasons you just said. It was his play on the field, not as a manager or, player manager as he was with the Reds for a little bit. But I differ in the other three, Bonds, McGwire, and Clemens. They were in a group that was a pretty heinous group. They lied. They did not tell the truth at first. Eventually, they all came clean, I believe. But I would have to say that all three would get a no vote from me. And I'm sorry, but to just extend your career with artificial means like that, it just does not make sense for me to be able to go into the Hall of Fame, even with an asterisk next to your name, because it was done artificially. True, they were good players, and like you said, McGwire and Sosa, if you lived through that era, you knew exactly what was going on. And by that, I mean it was just a home run race. Nobody actually knew what was going on, but they enjoyed the home run banter, and they thought the bats were corked. They thought the balls had changed. They just didn't know what had happened. Everybody didn't. And few suspected steroids until later on. So when that all came out, yeah, I would have to say no to all three from me.
Okay. Well, we agree to disagree. I just figured they're gonna get in somewhere along the line. Whether this generation, it may be, we may not be around to see it, but they might get in on some kind of veterans vote in future years. And as the writers change and things like that, that's what's going to happen. Different opinions are going to come out, and they're going to be softer on this whole PED. I think with McGwire, I think him and Sosa were both kind of used. Major League Baseball knew there was something up, and they looked the other way because this was bringing in big crowds and big audiences on television, and so he should get in just for that. For much like Babe Ruth saved baseball after the Black Sox scandal, him and Sosa kind of brought baseball back after that strike that was so painful and hurtful to everyone. So I that's why I'd give him consideration for that.
Well, thank you very much, Trip, for the email. We'd like to encourage our other listeners to send in some email. It kind of spurs us on, and we appreciate the thanks for doing the show from Trip. And if you want to send us an email, you can send it very easily to info@mlbthisweek.com. Go right on the website there at mlbthisweek.com. There's a small section there to contact us if you'd like. Send us your thoughts. Send us an audio message if you want. Maybe we'll be able to play it on an upcoming show. So thanks again, Trip. And moving on with this show, Gary, who would you say? I know you said that the Mets had left you with such a painful feeling after they got out of the playoffs very early in the wild card series. Who would you say has more pain now, either the Washington Nationals or the San Francisco Giants, with the way they've both exited out of the playoffs?
Wow, that's a great question. Uh you know what? I'm 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 going to say the Nationals,
Okay.
because the Giants have been there, have experienced it. Um, didn't have the best of teams. Kind of, got into it. But really, with the second half they had, they were fortunate to get into it. And the Nationals dominated the East all year, and people were picking them with the Cubs. Unfortunately, they're in the same league as the Cubs, and only one could win. But they were considered up there with the Cubs, and they really had the second best record, I think, in the National League. I think it is. I think they are the ones that are feeling it more because of the number of failures over the last 5 years or so, whatever it's been, and how they failed in the first round of the playoffs. I don't think this team's been past the first round of the playoffs. So I'm going to say the Nationals.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. It seems like they've been doing the best that they can in the past 5 years. They've made the playoffs 3 times in that span, in the 5 year span, but they cannot get over the hump. They cannot get to that next level. And I think that game 5 just showed you exactly why. They're just not a team that can turn it up and ramp it up when they need to. They added Daniel Murphy this year, and he really was a great addition to that ball club. Bryce Harper, of course, played well, but also in that game 5, you have to look at your best player on the team, Jason Worth, or one of your highest paid players on the team, did not come through for the team. He left a lot of guys on base, had a couple of strikeouts. I think at one point the bases were loaded and he struck out. Here's where you earn your money. Get a hit, please.
Well, he did have a good series, though, in his defense. I think the guy that really hurt them in the series and in that final game was Harper. I don't think he came to play. I shouldn't say he didn't come to play. He came to play. I just think he didn't deliver. And much like you said, in the key spots, those are the guys: Harper, Worth, Murphy, and Murphy didn't really deliver in that final game much. But I don't know. It makes you wonder: is there some kind of atmosphere in a clubhouse that's not good? Is it too much me, and not? Now they said Dusty did make a lot of change, really changed the clubhouse around a lot, but still don't know whether or not they, if they even like Bryce Harper there, the other players. And all you need is, and it may not even be his fault. I think the guy was kind of rushed to the majors, and he's still having growing pains, as crazy as that might sound. But I just think that there's something that you can't put your finger on that doesn't seem to work right there. I mean, they have the good pitching. They have 3 solid starting pitchers that they had going. Even though they're going to point to not having Strasburg, but Tyler Rourke had a good year. Gio Gonzalez is a good pitcher. I don't know. Maybe I can't say that guy's name. Scherzer. Thank you. We know how good he is. I don't know. It's very difficult to place a finger on what's wrong with that team, because when you look at it, they're pretty solid team, but that's what it makes you think sometimes whether it's in the head or not.
And of course, the Washington Nationals releasing their closer, Jonathan Papelbon, in mid-August this year. That is a head scratcher as well. Could have he made a difference in the playoffs? I'm not sure of that, but timely hitting did leave the Nationals when they needed it the most. 1 in 10 runners in scoring position, one game for all the marbles, so to speak, and they weren't bold enough. They weren't daring enough, and they went home. So, watching tonight's series, as we're talking here on the podcast, it's the Cubbies and the Dodgers in game one. And as we were talking about a little bit before the show, Gary, you were mentioning about all the networks on and having a problem sort of finding the game a lot.
Yeah, it's got to be a little confusing, especially if the games overlapped. You'd have some on FS1, some on TBS. I think there was even the wild card game was on ESPN. Going back to that, one game was on MLB Network. I think they have to have a more set schedule to come out with, and work the games better than that. Just we know it's kind of like FS1 is the National League games, and TBS is the American League games. But then like I said, they had the wild card was on ESPN, the National League. MLB had a division game thrown in there. It just gets too confusing. I think just keep one team, the division series. They could have had an American League game and at night and one in the morning and in the evening, and the next day have the National League instead of having both play. I don't know. I don't know how I would work it or how I'm trying to say it, but it was just too confusing after a while.
Yeah, my contention with it is a few nights this week I had to travel from different places coming home, and I tried to find games on the radio dial.
Oh.
You want to talk about an impossibility? I couldn't even find a game on any AM station or any FM station, and normally you could pull those games up with no problem in previous years, and it seems like baseball has sort of left radio in the dust.
Well, I don't know. See, I agree with that. I came home one day from work and I was going to tune into, I guess it was Cleveland and Boston playing, and I was told that it was on ESPN radio. Well, lo and behold, ESPN New York is playing the local show. It's not playing the game. Now I don't understand that unless I was misled that it was on ESPN radio. But if it was on ESPN radio, it should have been across the nation. It shouldn't have been the local affiliates can opt out of the game. So you're 100% right there. Trying to find a game is almost impossible. But I think that might have been the case. I think in some instances, the local affiliates opted out to run their local shows, and we're left holding a bag. We're at nowhere.
And as you said, very difficult to find the games sometimes on the different networks. And my main beef is a lot of the games are starting way too late. Maybe it's good for the younger kids that aren't working and all, but if you've got a job and you're out the door for 8 o'clock or 8 to 4 or 9 to 5 type of job, you can't stay up till after midnight unless you want to have a bad day the next day. So my solution would be bring those game times back to where they were in the regular season. A 7 p.m. Eastern time start is about the latest I think I would do. 8, 8:30, 9, 9:30. For me, that's just, a third of the country is not going to be able to benefit from watching a game like that.
Again, I agree. It's the Washington Dodgers game was played in Washington and started at 8 o'clock. Why didn't it start at 7:30? Why didn't they start it at 7? They want the primetime audience. That's the whole thing. But see, my argument is if you want the primetime audience started at 7:30 then. Even that game would have been over by, it was 4 hours and some odd minutes. So you're talking about 11:30, 11:40 or something. Well, that's a lot better than 12:10.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Well, 10.
Yeah, it sounds a lot better. But it's all about advertising. It's all wanting to be in prime time. I don't see why 7:30 isn't a good time. This way you're ahead of prime time. You're grabbing the prime time audience. Hopefully you'll hold it through prime time. Instead of starting, you're right in competition with the shows at 8 o'clock. And then they don't start until 10 after because they got to do all the. It's another thing I don't understand. They have a half an hour pregame show. Then why do the guys in the booth got to have a pregame show for 10 minutes before the game starts? That's ridiculous. Let them come on at 10 to the hour then and start the game sharp at 8:01 or something.
And I
8 o'clock, 8:01.
And I think where Chicago, the 3-hour pregame show prior to tonight's series startup. So obviously a lot of people out in Chicago rooting on their Cubbies. Let's give a quick prediction before we wrap up tonight's show. I know we're going to play some audio with our picks, but I think we'll kibosh that and just encourage people to go back. You can listen to our older shows, and you can find them on our YouTube channel. Just look up the Baseball Talk Radio Show on YouTube, and you can find every show we've done back to the first one when we used to be named a different show. But it's show number 87. That is our picks for 2016. So if you want to go back and listen to the show that Tripp was talking about, just go back onto our YouTube channel, and you can hear it there. But let's give our picks for this NLCS matchup.
Might I add, subscribe if you could subscribe to the show on YouTube so you can get each and every episode, or subscribe on iTunes and you'll get each and every audio version of the show. Sorry, Rich, you want to go back to the predictions?
Excellent tip, and I do wholeheartedly agree. Just click the subscribe button and you'll get emails and updates when our next shows come out. Well, I'll take it first here. The LA Cubs series starts off in Chicago tonight. I think the Cubs are going to do it this year. All year they've been the team to beat. The Dodgers, in my opinion, have been a Cinderella team. As if you go back to the show, listen to myself and Gary talking about the Dodgers and where we thought they would end up, we didn't have too high of hopes for them in the beginning of the season before it even started. I think they've found something that they're making work for them, but I think the Cubs are too strong for them in this series. I think they're going to steamroll them, and I think it's going to be the Cubs triumphing in the NLCS this year.
Wow, everybody's picking the Cubs, so I'm going to pick the Dodgers just to be different. It could be that Cinderella thing, maybe. I'll preface it by saying that I'd like to steal either this game or the next game in Chicago to give them really chance. I think that if they lose the first two in Chicago, I think they'll get steamrolled, like you said, by the Cubbies. But what the heck? I haven't been right all year. The Mets and the Astros in the World Series, and the Astros didn't even make the playoffs. So I'll stick with I'll stick with the Dodgers.
All right. Well, a little scoreboard watching already. It's the top of the second in that game. Chicago has a 1-0 lead. They both have 2 hits apiece. We'll have to see what happens in this series. And, of course, we'll be talking all about it by the time the next show starts. If it goes 6 or 7 games, our next podcast will certainly be talking about that. And, of course, the American League Championship as well, as that shifts over to Toronto. Can the Blue Jays answer back with Cleveland's 2-0 lead? And we'll have that for you on the next show, too. Gary, it's been a fast show.
Well, Rich, what's your prediction on that series?
American League Championship Series, I would like to see the Jays come back with this, only because they remind me a little bit of the Nationals. They've been there, they've had some success, but they can't eclipse that into getting into a World Series. I'd like to see them win, even though Cleveland seems like a Cinderella team, came out of nowhere, the heart of the country, the breadbasket, Terry Francona, success story, so to speak. But I'd like to see the Jays come back and win that series.
I got to disagree again, Rich. I'm going with Cleveland. Chief Wahoo and the gang there, Terry Francona. I'm a Francona guy. He's a terrific manager. One of your former managers in Philadelphia there, too. Did a great job in Boston, won 2 world championships there. And I'm going with the Cleveland Indians.
All right. Well, we'll have to see what happens with that. They got a 2-0 lead. They're in the driver's seat. And we'll talk more about this on the next podcast of the Baseball Talk Radio Show podcast. And I want to encourage everyone to go over to the website at baseballtalkradio.com. You can hear over 30 of the best baseball talk radio shows around, podcasts, whatever you want to call them. A lot of people that hear the word podcast, Gary, have to say, huh? What?
It's like an internet radio show.
Exactly. So stop on by. You can listen to the latest talk with all the teams. And we thank you all for listening to our show here as well.